Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. You've stumbled upon Margaret Pennard's channel on YouTube. I am a historical fiction and fantasy writer and an eclectic reader, and we're doing a wrap-up today. So welcome to Booktube. I've got my trusty cup of tea. I've got my 3 books that I've finished in the past couple weeks since last week's Wednesday wrap-up. It's a little low. I think usually I have 4 or so every 2 weeks, but I'm reading like a dozen books at once. So this is how it's going out the beginning of the year. I'm not sure why. One of these is a climathon book, so related to climate reading. 2 of them are translated, which turned out to be sort of a strange happenstance. And yeah, they're all physical books. So we'll go through what I thought of them and what I would recommend for people on this Wednesday wrap-up live from Ice Storm, Portland. I was chatting with some folks in the comments a little bit earlier, and I'm taking myself out for pizza after this because you got to help those local struggling businesses. They get 2-3 days where they can't work, and hey, there goes payroll, you know? So watch out for them. Go find your native pizza parlor. Leslie was here saying happy Wednesday earlier, and Eloise Barr, happy Wednesday. And Anita just popped in to say hello. And Leo is here. Hey, Leo, it's been a while. I hope you're safe in the ice storm. I'm guessing if you have internet, you are. Leah from Pen to Paper is here. Hello and welcome from a much colder place, usually. And yeah, is anyone else watching some fun videos, shorts, TikToks, wherever you watch them, of the crazy ice reactions? I mean, the cars are a bit sad because, you know, that's going to make someone's life go sideways on the insurance. But people who are making fun, like, I don't know, hockey skating videos or cross-country skiing videos or just sort of sliding. I sent a couple of those to some friends this morning. They're very entertaining, and I like when nobody gets hurt. Eloise did a fun controlled slide down her hill this morning. And yes, Leah went for tacos earlier. It is Wednesday and you already went out for tacos. Wow. That's early for you. I'm impressed. Or maybe you mean earlier in the week. Yeah. Yes, thankfully still have power and warmth. So many friends have been without power for days. I know. Yeah, winter weather finally hit after New Year's, says Leah. Yeah. Happy January, everybody. Hope those resolutions are staying strong through the ice. Tacos earlier in the week. Gotcha. Okay, so Wednesday wrap, all physical books, and we're going to start with fiction or nonfiction. We're going to start with the Climathon book. So I'm going to start with The Secret Network of Nature by Peter Wolleben. I'm going to just guess how to pronounce German because I don't speak German. This is translated by Jane Billinghurst, originally out in 2017. I think translated to English in 2019. It's part of like a series of nonfiction, which is, you know, pretty rare. But you might have heard of this author from The Hidden Life of Trees, which I think is his biggest hit. But I found this used, as you can tell, in my local bookstore and got it maybe a year ago. I've been waiting for the right opportunity to dive into it, maybe more than a year ago. And started last month and just finished a couple days ago. So let's take you through my process here. I've got my review up where I made all my notes. So I'll just like take you through the fun things. So if you know my system, I have these like upper page turns and these lower page turns. So this is a 3-star. We'll go through why. I mean, this could easily be dropping sticky notes everywhere. Easily be a really good read for someone else, but there's something about the tone, which may be in the translation, but I don't think so because it's very consistent, that just didn't jive with me. So some of the fun things, though, we have another mention of a trophic cascade on page 6. So that made me happy, learning different language and jargon for different areas. Basically, the book, to give an overview, is about how, you pull one cord or press one button in nature and it doesn't just do one thing. There's a cascade of following events like a domino fall. And so if we're going to mess with something like introducing a species somewhere where they aren't used to being, we have to know a little bit more about the whole ecosystem and how those dominoes will fall if we don't want to end up landing ourselves in hotter water than we were in originally. So he's talking about all these things that relate. And specifically, he's a forester in central Germany or Central Europe in Germany. And that's where his experience comes from. And he observes things and relates his observations. So, credible viewpoint, very willing to listen. I liked how he explained a lot of things. He talked about bark beetles, which are a hot topic, especially here in the Western U.S., as the areas where the pine forests are getting damaged by that. He had some interesting accounts of why, if you're trying to be measured in your interventions and you leave some trees up, well, that destroys their network. So it's kind of like leaving a single animal in a zoo. Like, he has no friends, he has no social system, he has no mate. Like, how do you think they're going to do? Right? Not well. Which is good thinking, but I don't think is often accounted for in environmental projects. We also talk about the definition of nature, which I thought was a really interesting question. So here's your first discussion question, if you're watching this on the replay. Is nature the opposite of culture? Or if not, how do you define nature? He goes into a little bit about, is it distance from settlements? Is it how untouched it is? We get into some real slippery slope arguments if we frame things a certain way. So I thought that was a really good discussion question. Also, he says the soil retains the imprint of plow pans, which is whenever you plow the soil, for tens of thousands of years, which I thought was super interesting because I'm sure archaeologists can find the imprint of plow pans, what they're called, in undisturbed soil. But I'm very curious how you would detect that when more than one disturbance has happened. Like if it was plowed under for farms and then you let browsing animals on and did livestock grazing, like you're transforming the environment with many human adaptations. So that was interesting to learn about plowing being so disruptive. And then also, just like a side comment at the end of the book, he talks about how did our brains grow larger? This is an evolutionary question lots of people have researched. And he looked into chimpanzees and how their brain works. So if you've looked into sleep science, you know that when we sleep is often when the whatever system goes through and like brushes away, destroys all the weak or damaged cells so that you can restart, like rebooting your computer when you wake up. And what happens is that chimpanzees are much quicker at doing that. And so when they clean out those cells, not through sleep, I just use that as like where I learned about that process. They have like no incidence of cancer. And of course, in humans, we have lots of cancer because those cells stay around for longer. So he almost posed it as a trade-off between larger brains and, inventiveness and cancer. And I was like, that's an interesting juxtaposition. Obviously not something we personally choose. It's just evolution has chosen. But I thought that was kind of interesting. So that's cool. Lots of good stuff in this book. As I'm saying, like The Secret Network of Nature could be really good, could be recommended for Climathon. I think I have a couple more, and then I'll get into why it was just not a great fit for me. He talks about the, and this is going to get like technical, and I'm not sure if I understand it. So talks about the Amazonian rainforest and the fact that the soil is 30 meters deep, which means like 90 feet, right? And you think, wow, that's a lot of soil. That must be really healthy. And he says, no, because when it's soil instead of gravel or rock, like all the good nutrients get washed down through it and drain away so that nothing is available until you get 90 feet down. So all the stuff that grows on the surface, like, isn't able to get to those nutrients. So what saves this huge swath of forest is the fact that the Sahara sends sand over the oceans every year. It's like, what? People have done research, people have tracked it. I'm like, wow, that's really kind of cool. If I understood it correctly. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But here's where I kind of just detached the language. So let's give an example. Page 86. Okay, he's talking about the male bark beetle. The little male bark beetle keeps his eye on the prize, finding a mate. It excavates a nuptial chamber under the bark and, using a different scent signal, summons female clientele. Once they arrive, there's first sex and then work. Mostly women's work because there are between 1 and 3 females per male. The female beetles construct more tunnels with tiny alcoves for the eggs, which are laid one after the other once construction is complete. All the while, the females continue to mate to ensure they get enough sperm to fertilize 30 to 60 eggs. The bark beetle male doesn't stand idly by, though. Like a true gentleman, he helps by removing the frass. So you will see in this example, there is a lot of information delivered about an entomologist's paradise. Beth Ann may comment later. But the way that it's like anthropomorphized, to use a controversial term, and like clientele, like human words that have certain associations are dropped in, it strikes me as both kitschy and tacky and takes me out of the whole learning, discovering science with awe type thing. Let's see. There are some other examples, but I'll like pause that there because I haven't looked at comments in a while. So let me check back in. Shannon came in. Hello. Just got done with her, I think, 3-hour productivity live streams. Excellent. Nice to see you. And RC Scott. Yes, cold. I've seen some Chicago videos. We were talking about ice videos earlier. Chicago's got it for sure. So yeah, so 3 stars. Excellent science. Excellent discussion questions. One of the other discussion questions he brings up is an important... Oh no, this is one where I didn't like where he went with it. An important question is, does evolution move at different speeds and in different directions in different places? And then he went on to say, no, it's just insulation of privilege depending on where you are. And I'm like, so that's not an important question. That's just an ignorant question. So anyway, like, some good stuff, but the tone really put me off. I hope it's not the translator. Translated by Jane Billyhurst. I think she probably worked very hard to maintain his like folksy anthropomorphic tone. But there, that's my first Climathon read for 2024. So we done. Leo's weighing in. I think that tone will bother me too. I was going to add it to my TBR, but we'll take your rating into account and read other stuff. I don't know, read other people's, right? Maybe The Hidden Life of Trees is more focused. Yeah, so glad I read it, glad I got into some of those questions. That is my take on book number 1, translated from the German. So we're going to switch it up and go into French. The Little Paris Bookshop by Nina George. This is my second read. This is translated by Simon Parr. And this is from 2015, so a little older. And it's a fiction novel, sort of a romance, but like more than a romance, sort of literary. And And this one I gave 3.25. Where is it? Yeah, 3.25. So again, both of these books, they're not that big. They're not that big, but it took me a while to get through them, and I was impatient, which is never a good sign. The language was fine, the story was fine, the characters were interesting, but I was like frustrated with them. And I think that may be a pacing indicator, or maybe a character indicator. I'm not sure. So let's dive into Little Paris Bookshop, which I just wrote notes about here. So I would say the good things about this book are the humor. There's a lot of dry humor, as you would expect in a French novel. I think I was going to read a quote from this one. Yes. Okay. So basically, the overview for this book is that there's this man who's middle-aged, living in Paris, has a bookshop in a boat on the Seine, so pretty picturesque. But he maintains his life through being totally closed off and allowing no one into his life since this woman left him like 20 years ago. And that was the great love of his life, and it's over, and he's been like closed off since then. So really sad. But then the book starts off and gives you a little background, and then there's an inciting incident. It has to do with the boat, which is why I put the narrow boat in my thumbnail. And so it's pretty exciting. You get a little bit of Paris. You get a little bit of like Parisian characters, which was fun at the beginning. But then the novel actually travels, and he goes to the south of France where this woman was from and sort of revisits his life decisions along with someone who lives in his building who's like a young author. And they pick up some other people along the way, which I won't spoil. So the Little Paris Bookshop. I liked the humor. And I'll read a quote, which is evidence of that really nice writing in parts here. Page 109. Okay. So this is, let me put up the little spoiler thing. It'll only be for one page, but in case you don't want any indication of what the main action is, I'll put this up for you. Okay. So they're on the narrow boat, and he makes the decision all of a sudden to take the boat and go on the river, where it has not moved for 20 years. It's just been parked where it is, right? So he and this young author who jumps on and loses all his stuff in the canal motor away. The harbor master says, note, repeat announcement to the two comedians who smoked out of the Champs-Elysees harbor. Starboard is the one with the thumb on the right, or whatever it was. It's funny. So they get out of the city, and like everything's completely different because Paris is Paris. And this is what Jean is thinking. Yet there was something else that was completely unlike Paris. Something very specific was missing. Something perdu, that's his last name, had grown so accustomed to that its absence gave him a slight dizziness and caused a humming in his ears. Immense relief swept through him when he realized what it was. There was no rush of cars, no roar of the metro, no buzz of air conditioners. None of the whir and grumble of millions of machines and transmissions and elevators and escalators. There were no sounds of reversing trucks, trains braking, or heels on gravel and stone, or my heat, which just kicked on. None of the bass-driven music from the yobs, two houses down, the crackle of skateboards, the chatter of scooters. It was a Sunday quietness of the kind Perdu had first experienced, this ripely and fully when his father and mother had taken him to see relatives in Brittany. There, somewhere between Pont-Aven and Kerdruck, the silence had struck him as the essence of life, hiding itself away from city dwellers at the end of the world in Finistère. Paris had seemed to him like a giant machine that droned and boomed away to produce a world of illusion. It put people to sleep with laboratory-made scents that imitated nature and lulled them with sounds, artificial light, and fake oxygen, as in E.M. Forster's books, which he had loved as a boy. When Forster's literary machine breaks down one day, people who have so far only communicated via their screens die from the sudden silence, the pure sunlight, and the intensity of their own unfiltered sensations. They die from an overload of life. And I was like, oh boy, she's got our number, our modern civilization here. So I thought that was pretty darn good. And I'll take that off if you didn't want to hear the spoiler. That is done. But so there is some really nice writing in this. It's a voyage of discovery for this man in Paris, and like he regrets his decision. He tries to figure out how to make his life better. It's a slow-moving, character-driven love story. There's just some parts that I think are more for European sensibilities, and this was written in French and translated into English. And I think some of the European readers would be more forgiving of automatic attraction and sort of hazy background stories, or, you know, reasons if they're not the main character, whereas that sort of like frustrated me a little bit. So great read, interesting story, fun if you really want to laze around in southern France and hear about the Luberon and the wind, whatever that's called, the Mistral, and all that kind of stuff that you hear about in Peter Mail's books. So an interesting read, but like not what I wanted, not what I was looking for. So great for someone else. I will be passing it along. I'm going to take this opportunity before the final book to say, like the stream, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, much appreciated. And a reminder that we have some cool events coming up. So it is Wednesday now, and in a couple days I will have my newest fireside chat, and I am hosting Denise Williams, who is a fantastic romance author. She wrote How to Fail at Flirting, which I read on Cynthia at Book Whimsy's recommendation and loved. And then the sequel to that, the second book, which I also loved. And she's got many more of her backlist that I need to read. So very excited for that. So be sure to check that out and put it on your schedule. It's going to be Friday evening by the fireside. And okay, now regularly scheduled programming. Oh no! Leo tried Hidden Life of Trees and didn't make it all the way through. Was it because of the tone? Was it because of the translation? Or was it just like too slow moving and too full of factoids? Interesting. Yeah, it's sad because we want people to know these things about nature and ecosystem saving, right? But like, come on, folks. Publish some. And the other thing I was going to mention to people is that the February Patreon Book Club is reading a Black author for February, of course, but we don't know which one. We don't know which style, which flavor we want to go with. So I have some vastly different styles, genres, flavors in the poll, and I just pop the poll into the chat, and feel free to like vote in it. You don't have to be in the book club. We're just getting, you know, crowdsourced feedback. Yeah, well, I would need to be a scientist to do that, and I am not. So I've got the other half of the equation. All right, so final book of today's Wednesday wrap is going to be Self-Portrait in Black and White, Unlearning Race by Thomas Chatterton Williams. Sorry for the ring light reflection. I'm unearthing all my secrets. The TV's out from under wraps, and it's reflecting the ring light too. So you know, I'm using lights over here very craftily. Okay, so this book was the favorite. It's 4 stars, and I'm putting it in my social science favorites on Bookshop, in case people are curious. I got it from the library, as you can see. That's why it's shiny. And it's very short. So while these were, 350, whatever, fiction size, this one is only like 150 pages. It's a memoir, and it's Thomas Chatterton Williams' reflection on his identity and how he fits into the world, based on having children and what purpose Black identity serves in his life, as well as in the culture moving forward with the drastic issues of race inequality that we have. And so I thought this was a really well done musing on the topic and sort of relating and not arguing really forcefully, but like giving background and reasons and sort of emotional depth to considering these very theoretical sounding issues. And he's also talked to a lot of people about it and gotten their input and reflected on it. So you see a lot of inner work displayed on the page. So let me bring up my notes for that. And there may be a quote to read on this as well. Okay, so here are some of the like top points that I came across and I put in my review on Storygraph in case you're curious. My notes are all on Storygraph for these. So on page 32, he says, because race in our imaginations most of all, but that is crucial, is so often classed, meaning that when we think of different races, often there is an association of class with those races, and really the prejudices may be attached to one or the other of those things, but they're inextricably linked for some people, for some people's training. And I thought that was a really valid point, and part of his argument later for like decentering racial identity. So I thought that was really interesting. That's the second discussion question for today. But I'll tease it out a little bit later in another point. So he talks about a lot of his experiences. First of all, in case you want to know, let's see if I can do this right so people can see it. Because we're talking about identity, this is what he looks like. And he's talking about how his features affect people around him, get him different experiences, basically like reflecting on why how he looks affects his life experience. And he has a Black father and a white mother. He married a white woman, French woman, and I think they mostly live in France. And so when he started having kids, he started asking himself these questions that he'd sort of sublimated up to that time. And so let me jump back into my reviews here. So some of the experiences that he talks about, first of the ones that hit me was getting out the vote and canvassing for Obama in Baltimore. And that thing about race mixing with class in terms of prejudices. He says, do I really need to pretend that we are all united, socially indistinguishable, in order not to deny my African ancestry, to honor the experiences of my father's family? So he's in this situation where his experience is very different from the people that he's talking to. And on the one hand, he wants to honor the sacrifices, the suffering, the pain of his ancestors. But on the other, he's looking towards how do we get away from repeating that? And like racial solidarity or class solidarity get you different places. And so he's trying to query that in a delicate manner, because it's something that that tends to be very reactive for folks. So I thought it was really good. Page 75. So he's reflecting on this experience in Baltimore. He says, professional options, class distinctions and tastes, educational attainment, geographical mobility, and perhaps as crucial as everything else combined, inner psychological wounds and barriers strike me as far more indicative of the shape of all those lives than the ethnic, national, or biogenetic indicators. And here is where I had a very interesting Libra serendipitous moment. I think that's what we're going to call moments when you're reading more than one book and they talk to each other. I've got another one that I'll revisit because I forgot at the end of the nature book. But I'm reading The Fatal Shore, which is about how Australia as a British colony got started, the penal colony, the settlers, the survival, the prisoners, people who were transported. And I just finished the part that talks about Irish that were transported from the 1810s to the 1830s, and how, yes, a lot of them were transported because of crimes based on poverty and survival. Maybe 10 to 20% were transported because of political motives or politically motivated crimes like rebellions, etc. And what he says is that the English, who were also transported for political crimes, once they got to Australia, they served their time, they had farms, they were out, they had the opportunity that they had been looking for in England. But the Irish, who had been denied like citizenship and personhood and had undergone a much less class-based and much more identity-based oppression, when they got into Australia, they nursed those, I would call it a psychological wound, like Thomas Chatterton Williams does. And they stuck together and sort of formed an opposition force in Australia. So I was interested in the fact that, there's different groups that have the same experience, poverty, oppression, but because of their identity, will react to it differently in like 1830 versus today in like 2020. So I was like, I did not expect to have those two books talk to each other, but hey, that's where we landed this week during the ice storms. Yeah. Unlocking all the secrets, ring light secrets, just the TV. The TV is out because I actually got a VHS tape because I was so bored preparing and like exhausting myself for all the storm prep. Not great. But to return to the book, let's see. Williams talks about admiring his father's example. So his father is considered, and that's how he portrays it, considered a black man. But he admires his willingness to hold two bitterly conflicting ideas in his head at once. Race is not real. Race has harmed me severely. And so I think his son, sort of considering that ability, is trying to move to the next stage or the next phase of racial integration and equality, which is what do we have to change to change the pain of that situation, change the harm of that situation. One of his other discussion questions is, he doesn't answer this one, but he does wonder, why is it that some people do care enough to get out of their own cotton batting, do dare to lose their illusions about the unimpeachable moral rectitude of the tribe to which they were born? Why are some people able to imagine their lives beyond abstract boundaries, and here race is an abstract boundary, while others can't seem to do it? And this is available to everyone across the spectrum in many different spectrums, like, imagining yourself living in a different place, having a different family, having a different class experience, having different privileges, having a different ethnic makeup. And yeah, so I thought that was a really interesting question. Maybe we need brain research for that. And then that develops into, most white people don't or cannot think very seriously and with adequate nuance and stamina, and I want to highlight, and stamina, about Black people at all, and they lack the imagination or will to try. And I thought that was really important. The fact that when you are the oppressing class or in the privileged class, you can be oblivious, and that is a privilege because you don't have violence or harm addressed to you on a daily basis. He has an extensive section where he's pushing back on Ta-Nehisi Coates' position on things, because Coates has a memoir where he talks about certain incidents in his life and how he reacted to them, and Williams is questioning, how do we get past this? He says, as long as Black people can be so easily triggered and provoked, so long as such barely submerged ancestral pain hovers just beneath the surface, we'll never be free or equal. And I put a question mark and like had a down tab on this, because that seems very controversial to me to say. That seems very disputable, let's say. And so this is part of his like delicately trying to show people how he's thinking about things, and like, is there another way we can submerge that ancestral pain deeper, or exercise it out so that it's no longer something in the equation, like, but not forget the pain and suffering of those that came before? There are many competing goals in that equation, and so having the discussion about it is really valuable, I think. He talks about Adrian Piper, who I think is he talks about her as a person who has retired from being Black. I think they went to Europe, kind of like James Baldwin, and had the option to pass, and chose to let go of these things that are attached to Black identity. So he goes on a lot about quotes from Adrian Piper. And here's an interesting thing. Piper was reflecting on being challenged. So if she is light-skinned or sort of ambiguous, sometimes Black people will challenge her, whether she is Black. This is before she retired from being Black. And this sentence from Williams is, or Piper, I'm not sure, maybe I quoted a quote, because the anger of the Black people challenging her is justified and sometimes arbitrary, one's sense of fairness is violated. One feels both unjustly accused or harassed, and also remorseful and ashamed at having been the sort of person who could provoke the accusation. And so this is something I had not considered, right? So this is a mixed race person or a light-skinned person who for much of their life has identified with the goals and experience and history of Black identity, but then experiencing being sort of on the end of that spectrum and having other people in her corner, or should be in her corner, question her validity of claiming that identity. One feels both unjustly accused or harassed, and also remorseful and ashamed. And that's something I hadn't considered, that like, it's not just white people guilt, there's also this whole spectrum in between, and like, how do you perceive yourself, and how does that make your interactions with other people from all different experiences change? And like, oh, I can't edit this. Okay. Yeah. It just makes it clear how complicated this is, and how much it can trip someone up in just ordinary interactions, conversations, little tiny moments. So that's something to talk about and like consider. I thought was interesting. We got more things I want to work out about Sonderweg, which is a German phrase, and also pertains to like the white guilt thing, but I want to think about that some more. And then here's what he comes to, Williams in Self-Portrait in Black and White. Page 134, he says, I struggle to slough off the feeling that I've arrived at an existential bind, in many ways similar to the one that grips secular Jews. The purpose of all these generations of struggle has always been the freedom to choose and create the self with dignity. But it is precisely this coveted self-regard and autonomy that threatens now to annihilate the very racial identity that won it in the first place. And yet, and then he advocates annihilating this racial identity because the more important goal for him is freedom to choose and create the self-dignity. And so the grouping, he says, needs to be like loosened in terms of identity and more open. And I just thought that was like really interesting to read as a person who has not gotten into all this theory stuff and philosophy stuff and logic stuff. He makes it very readable. I don't have to have a PhD in this to read his experiences and think about them. So I like this. Hi, JD. Late, but hello. Irregardless, yes, I will put an extra IR in there because we love an extra suffix. So yeah, so that, and I thought that was interesting when he compares it to like the Jewish experience. Like you think of being haunted for generations and persecuted and maintaining that identity, but then when you want the freedom to choose who you're going to marry or how you're going to live or where you're going to work, and like does it come back to saying, no, you need to do this religious duty? Or yeah, it's just goals and discussion important. That's what I'm coming back to. And then there's another final controversial thing that's actually a quote from Henry Louis Gates Jr., who I don't think I've read directly yet. I think I've just read quotes of his in other people's books. But he says, towards the end, any human being sufficiently curious and motivated can fully possess another culture, no matter how alien it may appear to be. And so that doesn't really stand up to the modern idea of cultural appropriation, but I think Gates is getting at the fact that that's part of what's inherent in his idea of freedom, is choosing your beliefs and choosing your community, and that's like a full equality. I don't know, what do you think? I think that's what it means. And I could see that point, but I also think it's possible for people to be curious and motivated but still irresponsible, and then I would still consider that cultural appropriation. Curious and motivated. That doesn't say anything about, well, motivated from a good place, not motivated by like commercial means or monetary means. I guess that's what I consider the line for cultural appropriation, is when people are doing something to appeal to a population so that they can sell things to them. That's what I don't like. So, yeah. And then he concludes with, I am determined to live with precisely this level of childlike foolishness. So in the same way he talks about his dad having the faith to hold two ideas that conflict, they're both true, and he's using both of them because they're his life experience. Thomas Chatterton Williams says, I'm determined to live with precisely this level of childlike foolishness. And it's how he's approaching his interactions and valuing a certain type of naivete, even after doing all this research and all this reflection. So I really liked it. I picked it up, I think, because of our migrant souls and reading about myths of Latino identity. And I was like, ooh, I'm going to try to find something that's like in the same vein, but sidestep in my list of TBRs. And so this one's from the library. And I'm glad I picked it up because it was the best read so far of 2024. But I'm pretty confident the next few are also going to be good. So I'm happy about that. Let's see. Double dots. Oh, yeah, we're talking about titles and names. Yeah. Double O bananas. Cute. Possess a culture. Well, I think he means like it's yours, not that you possess in any sort of other sense. Appropriation and accusing people of it is always peculiar. Yeah. Yeah. So I just thought there was a lot of thought-provoking stuff, and he writes it in a really accessible way, at least to me. There's a book I'm reading now, which I will go into later, but I'm listening to it, and the sentence structure is inverted in a lot of the sentences, and I'm finally getting used to it like 5 hours in. But like I couldn't understand what was being said because my mind was expecting something different. So it's like a workout. But this one is not that. This one is like complicated and long, and you have to sort of like keep your mind focused, but good, but rewarding at the end of it. Oh yeah, amazed once again by how many people quote King while still being pretty awful. Yeah, okay, Dave. That was barely a blink on the ice storm agenda, but yeah. 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 See, I think that's what he's doing. He's questioning whether naive is a bad thing. And he's saying sometimes you need to intentionally keep that childlike wonder or curiosity or whatever it is that people say adults can't survive with that, and stubbornly hold on to it. I'm all for stubbornly holding on to things, as you can see in the background. So anyway, yes, that's my Wednesday wrap up. Only 3 books, but I had a lot to say about them, as you can see. Oh, and the book Serendipity for The Secret Network of Nature was page 228 in this book. What some people mourn as a loss of diversity, others embrace as an opportunity for humanity to bid goodbye to racial differences. Which is exactly what Williams is talking about. Except he barely mentions it and doesn't go into considering it, and like the whole book is considering the point. So nature book on race, they're serving different purposes, but I had 2 book serendipity moments. That's pretty fun to celebrate. So yeah. I'd rather be a kind fool than an intelligent asshole any day. Exactly. All right, well, I'm going to wrap up today and just encourage everyone to keep on their calendar. Friday at 5 is our next fireside chat with Denise Williams, who writes wonderful contemporary romances. Just a lot of heart, a lot of humor, a lot of tender understanding of like inner turmoil. There's some pining, there's some angst. It's good stuff. So we'll either be doing verbal improv or flash fiction and working on our works in progress. So tune in to find out more. And thanks so much for watching today. Happy reading, everyone, whether you're in an ice storm or not. I hope you're keeping warm and staying safe. All right, take care, everybody.